You don't even know how many times you've left yourself, not in death but in climax, not in grand betrayals but in quiet, invisible moments. Every time you chased pleasure instead of purpose, every time you emptied yourself not out of love but out of habit, you called it just sex, you laughed it off. They told you pleasure was a prize, they told you climax was the destination. And they weren't wrong, but they also didn't tell you the whole truth. Yes, there is something divine in the moment of surrender, something holy in the pulse of release when shared in love, in presence, in souled union. Orgasm can be a doorway, a mystical melting into oneness and a burst of light where your mind disappears and your body sings. The moment of orgasm is not merely a neurochemical spike or physical convulsion. It is, in the hidden dimensions of the human being, a profound rupture, an energetic event in which the subtle body momentarily dislodges from the physical form, exposing the soul to forces beyond the material world. This rupture is what ancient esoteric traditions called the celestial tear, and in its wake, the soul can either ascend, fragment, or subtly leak into dimensions beyond our comprehension. Many ancient spiritual lineages regarded orgasm with a kind of double reverence, as a sacred gateway and a potential trap. The Sufi mystics called it the narrow bridge between the self and the absolute, while the Vedic rishis viewed it as a moment when the veil thins, an opening through which divinity may enter or exit, depending on one's awareness. These ancient traditions all understood that energy does not simply disappear when we release it. It goes somewhere, and unless we are trained in inner direction, spiritual protection, or energy circulation, that energy will not return to us. Instead, it may float untethered, leaving a fragment of our soul's cohesion behind with each climax. In esoteric psychology, this is known as dissociation, but in spiritual science, it is considered dispersal of essence, a dangerous act if repeated unconsciously over time. Each time a human being reaches the peak of orgasm, their etheric field momentarily unbinds. And if there is no conscious recall, no sealing, and no spiritual containment, a trace of the soul may drift outward. This loosening of the soul is not always negative. In conscious practices, such as sacred tantra, the same release can be used to contact higher realms, commune with divine beings, or transmute lower patterns into illumination. However, when unconscious, habitual, or empty of presence, the release of orgasm becomes like an untied balloon. Energy spills out chaotically, and part of the individual's core coherence goes with it. Therefore, in order to truly understand the phenomenon of soul leakage, one must return to the ancient anatomy of the self and respect the orgasm not just as a pleasurable event, but as a sacred and volatile crossing point. This is not a moral issue. It is not about guilt or purity. It is about energetic integrity. And when the layers of the self are understood and honored, we begin to see that every climax is either a death or a rebirth, depending entirely on the awareness we bring to it. Every human being is surrounded by a series of energetic layers commonly referred to as the aura. The auric field serves as both a buffer and a membrane, protecting the integrity of the inner self from external forces and dimensional interference. This auric shell is not static. It fluctuates, expands, and contracts, depending on emotional state, spiritual practices, physical health, and, critically, sexual arousal and release. During orgasm, the auric field undergoes a sudden and violent expansion, similar to what occurs during near-death experiences, childbirth, or moments of intense mystical union. In this expansion, there is a momentary thinning of the auric membrane, particularly around the solar plexus, the sacral chakra, and the base of the skull.
points traditionally known to host the gates between dimensions.
In esoteric science, orgasm is understood as a burst of prana, or life force, that travels upward from the root chakra. In conscious spiritual practice, this energy is drawn vertically through the Sushumna Nadi, the central energy channel along the spine, and redirected toward the crown chakra. When properly managed, this vertical ascent opens the third eye and the thousand-petaled lotus, creating a bridge to higher planes. However, in the untrained or unaware individual, this energy does not rise. Instead, it explodes outward horizontally, destabilizing the auric shield and allowing a tear to form in the etheric web, a filament-like structure that binds the physical body to the soul. This outward explosion is what the Taoists referred to as Jing loss, and what Gnostic mystics described as the fraying of the garment of light. One of the lesser-known but vital components involved in this process is the golden thread, also known in Kabbalistic and yogic mysticism as the Anhat Karana, a luminous bridge that connects the individual soul to the higher self. During orgasm, this thread quivers. If the energy is misaligned, the thread can strain, and while it does not break except at death, it may lose tension, weakening the soul's anchoring and opening subtle access points through which energy and sometimes spiritual coherence can seep away. What leaks during orgasm is not simply energy. It is a type of essence, the refined residue of soul consciousness, sometimes called chrism in Gnostic scripture or tejas in Ayurvedic science. This substance is linked to divine memory, spiritual clarity, and inner orientation. When it is lost, it is not easily recovered. Over time, multiple losses of this substance may lead to spiritual confusion, emotional dissociation, or the haunting feeling of being not quite fully here. The astral body, which is responsible for dream, emotion, and memory, is particularly vulnerable during the moment of orgasm. This is because it is the layer most likely to slip out of alignment with the physical body when the auric field expands. Many initiates report strange dreams, hallucinations, or eerie emotional aftershocks after intense sexual experiences, especially when the act was not spiritually grounded or mutually respectful. These are not psychological symptoms. They are the echoes of astral displacement, signs that part of the soul moved out of phase with the body. Even more dangerously, when the auric field tears and the soul partially exits, external entities, non-physical beings that inhabit the lower astral realm, may enter. The Gnostics called these beings archons, the Taoists referred to them as hungry ghosts, and indigenous shamans often describe them as spirit hitchhikers. They are drawn to the life force expelled during unconscious orgasm, and when the auric boundary is open, they may attach themselves to the weakened field, feeding on the individual's essence over time. This is not folklore. It is a well-known risk among initiates who engage in high-energy practices without spiritual hygiene. There is also the phenomenon of energetic imprinting, wherein a part of the soul becomes subtly tied to the person or environment in which the orgasm occurred. This is one reason why some individuals find it nearly impossible to forget certain lovers or feel haunted by past sexual encounters. The soul, having leaked into the field of another, has left behind a trace of its resonance, and unless this imprint is retrieved or transmuted, it can act as an anchor, pulling one's attention, dreams, and emotional energy toward that person for years. All of this illustrates a single critical truth. Orgasm is not neutral. It is either a portal or a pitfall, depending on the awareness of the participant. The celestial tear created at climax is an invitation for the soul to ascend or for the self to fragment. One of the earliest and least understood signs of soul leakage is a subtle loss of inner vision. This does not mean literal blindness, but a fading of the inner eye. Individuals who once had rich imagination, dream recall, or vivid visualizations often report a strange dullness creeping in after a series of intense sexual encounters. The colors of dreams fade, meditation becomes harder, mental imagery becomes dry and mechanical. This is not simply fatigue.
It is the result of the astral body losing cohesion. Since it is the astral body that projects images into consciousness, when it begins to fray, the screen of the mind turns blank or static-filled. People experiencing this often say, "I feel like my imagination has died," or "I can't see anything when I close my eyes anymore." What has died is not imagination, but the soul's projection capacity.
Among all dream archetypes, one of the most secret indicators of soul slippage is the recurring dream of falling, especially when it never ends in impact or resolution. Individuals often report being pulled downward or upward in their dreams through tunnels, into the sky, through space, without ever touching ground. When a soul is intact and properly seated within the body, the inner voice, the quiet guide we often call intuition or higher self, speaks with clarity. But after repeated soul leakage, individuals begin to experience static within that voice. Sometimes it becomes silent, other times it splits. The person may hear contradicting impulses or feel as if the voice no longer belongs to them. Another benefit of this discipline is the amplification of mental focus and willpower. From a psychological standpoint, the act of restraint rewires the limbic system, the primitive part of the brain responsible for impulses, and strengthens the prefrontal cortex, the seat of decision-making and higher reasoning. On a hormonal level, testosterone begins to recalibrate. Scientific studies, some buried in obscure Soviet-era medical journals, others quietly circulated in Eastern monastic orders, indicate that regular retention leads to heightened levels of testosterone, balanced endocrine function, and a surge in life force. Emotionally, the practitioner of this sacred art begins to feel a rare kind of freedom. The compulsions of lust no longer dictate his behavior. He is no longer pulled like a puppet by the strings of media, advertising, and cultural programming. He sees through the illusion of gratification and instead begins to experience joy, not in the release, but in the presence. Many ask, but is it healthy to retain for long periods? Doesn't it create tension? While it holds the key to power, clarity, and transformation, it also has the potential, if misunderstood or practiced without wisdom, to become a trap, a burden, or even a spiritual block. This chapter is not meant to discourage, but to protect. For every man who has risen through retention, another has fallen because he failed to understand its shadow. One of the most common and yet overlooked disadvantages of semen retention is psychological tension and energetic congestion. When a man begins to retain his seed without understanding the principles of energetic transmutation, he is likely to experience restlessness, irritability, mood swings, and even a kind of anxious paralysis. Semen is not just a physical fluid, it is energy. And energy, like electricity, must be grounded or channeled. If the channels of the body, what yogis call nadis and Chinese sages called meridians, are not open and flowing, the energy builds like steam in a sealed container. Over time, this pressure can manifest as headaches, insomnia, agitation, or even obsessive thinking. From a psychological perspective, this manifests as hyperfixation on the idea of purity. The individual becomes obsessed with tracking days, measuring streaks, avoiding triggers, and controlling every thought. What began as a spiritual practice becomes a mental prison. The libido, when not lovingly integrated, becomes a source of shame or fear. In my clinical practice, I have seen many men develop a deep conflict between their natural sexuality and their desire to ascend. Instead of finding liberation, they sink into self-hatred, religious guilt, or spiritual perfectionism. Another subtle but serious danger is ego inflation. Retaining one seed for long periods, especially in the early stages of spiritual development, can create a powerful sense of superiority or spiritual pride. The man may begin to see himself as more awake, more disciplined, or more masculine than others. This is a fatal illusion. The path of retention, if not accompanied by humility and service, inflates the lower ego instead of awakening the higher self. This inflated identity becomes brittle, defensive, and isolated. The man begins to believe he is beyond others, and in doing so, severs the very heart connection that true spiritual power is rooted in. From a biological standpoint, prolonged and inflexible retention can lead to hormonal imbalances and physical stagnation. The male reproductive system is not designed to hold semen indefinitely without cycles of release and renewal. While short to medium-term retention can increase testosterone and vitality, long-term retention, especially without proper energetic or creative outlets, can actually lead to a plateau or decline in testosterone, libido numbness, and emotional dullness. The body begins to signal that it needs a reset, but the mind, out of fear or pride, refuses. This stubbornness can create a fracture between mind and body, causing physical fatigue, tightness in the pelvic region, and a loss of emotional fluidity. There is also a deeply misunderstood spiritual danger, which I call the ascension bypass. This occurs when a man uses semen retention not as a tool for authentic transformation, but as a way to escape emotional pain, trauma, or unresolved wounds. Instead of facing his grief, anger, loneliness, or fear, he hides behind discipline. He mistakes repression for purification. But the soul cannot be tricked. The unhealed inner child, the repressed rage, the abandoned shadow, all of these forces begin to surface more violently when the life force is intensified. If not met with honesty and emotional integration, they can cause spontaneous emotional breakdowns, sexual nightmares, compulsive relapses, or worse, psychic fragmentation. Please share this video with whoever needs to see it.